But I never really sat and thought about each week. What am I going to accomplish by the end of this week? Well, this is what God did. Okay? It starts out with what he was going to do before he does it. Okay? So in other words, I mean, life has got to have dreams, goals, and then endpoints. Without dreams and goals to start out and without something that you're aiming to achieve, life becomes really meaningless. It's just a never-ending cycle of doing the same things over and over again, not really even knowing that you've gotten any better. Well, we're going to kind of back up. I know we're in the book of Genesis right now, way in the latter chapters, chapter 41 or 42. But I decided to jump back to Genesis 1 because I'd been thinking a lot about this topic. We'll title it Productivity and the Biblical Workweek. Genesis Chapter 1 is where we're going to mainly be here today. But I'm first going to just kind of recap a couple verses that we read from the parable of the sower in our current events message, and then put a little bit of a different light on these verses here for this topic. Matthew 25, verse 19, Jesus says, "After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. And his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord." Now, I didn't stress that a little bit, but I didn't stress that in our current events message. But if we want true joy in our life, it's got to be done God's way. Because he says, if you do these things and you're productive, you will experience joy. He says, enter thou into the joy of the Lord because of what you had accomplished. Verse 30, skipping on down to verse 30 of Matthew 25. And then Jesus says, And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I picked this study mainly because I'm coming off of a really busy season of hockey. We had since September we've been going nonstop with hockey. It seems either practices at night, practices or games at night, or during the weekend, and it just seemed like it was kind of taking up a lot of time, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I better manage my time? Because giving up hockey for our kids really isn't an option for us because it's such a great tool that teaches them life lessons, discipline, work ethic, and all these types of things. So I decided, to take a closer look at how can I be more productive? How can I make better use of my time so that I don't end up becoming the unprofitable servant cast into outer darkness, Because it has, admittingly, it has, the way I've balanced my schedule up to this point, it has hurt my productivity as far as putting out Bible studies. We haven't always met here in person here doing church service. So I really wanted to bear down and get and try to reset and try to figure out a way to be more productive because I don't want to be that guy. Again, I don't want to be that guy. So in an effort to try to figure that out, I thought the most natural place to start would be Genesis Chapter 1 because that was God's work week. And I thought, well, there's got to be, when you study the Bible long enough, you start figuring out that God has really showed us how to do everything. If you want to be productive, if you want to be happy, if you want to avoid pitfalls, just look at how He did it and then model your life after Him, and things will turn out pretty good. So, like I said before, we hear lots of sermons about grace and forgiveness, which are some of the most beautiful aspects of Christianity. But, let's face it, if you've been sitting in church for 40 years and you're still hearing messages about grace and forgiveness, then you've had a problem. I mean, you haven't learned grace and forgiveness after 40 years, then you got to be reminded of that every Sunday, then you're, I don't want to, be mean, but I mean, that's baby Christianity, in other words. That's the first steps of Christianity, is to learn to forgive people and to learn about Jesus' forgiveness for us. The deeper aspects of Christianity includes learning God's will, learning His ways, and trying to actually live according to His Word the best that we can. Anyway, so you're not going to hear too many sermons on Genesis chapter 1 about work ethic or how to model your work week. It's just, I've never even heard anything like that. But yet it's the first chapter of the entire Bible starts out with a work week. It's amazing. The very first thing. Usually if it's the first thing, it's probably pretty important. And there's actually many scholars like to say whenever something's mentioned for the first time, it's like the foundation, or it's the most important. I'm trying to think of the technical word they use for it, but it's some kind of a learning formula that they get into. Anyways, it's called the law of first mention. It means whenever something's mentioned first, it's very important. And that's where you're going to find the foundation for everything else that you build on top of that. So in other words, the entire Bible starts out with a work week. But yet we get into modern day Christianity again, and we don't hear that taught in the Pilgrims did. They taught a lot about work ethic, and the Calvinists even, they big on work ethic. But today now it's socialism Christianity. Free love, free grace for everybody, rainbows and big hearts. And that's all it amounts to. All right, so anyways, let's get into the word. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth." Okay, now just think about it. Just think if God didn't get up for work this week, his first week. We wouldn't be here if He just sat there and said, "I don't really feel like doing anything." We wouldn't be here enjoying everything, enjoying life and enjoying everything we have around us. Neither, if you equate this to the founders of America when they built the American system of government and so forth. If they hadn't done that for us, we wouldn't be enjoying the blessings that we enjoy. We're living off of the produce of somebody else's labor. And the point I'm going to tie into this is all work actually should, or it eventually, it does eventually benefit not just you. Yeah, you get a paycheck, but it's benefiting society as a whole. When you get up and you go to work and you do something, you're actually chipping in and helping out other people. You're not just doing it for yourself. But anyways, look at how this starts out. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This is the big picture. So God starts out His week by looking at the big picture. Now, in the rest of this chapter, you're going to see the details of creation. So what can we learn from this? How can we apply this to our life? Well, at the beginning of the week, we should kind of have an idea of what we want to accomplish that week. I know I've always been a planner. I've been planning. In fact, I think when I started studying the Bible, I read some proverb about the man who ponders the path of his feet. And so for 20 years or whatever, I would get up every morning. First thing I'd do is I'd draw a little start there, and I'd draw to the end, and then I'd draw my path, what I was going to do. It was a good system that worked. Not perfect. I'll share a little bit of a better system that I just came across here lately. But I never really sat and thought about each week. What am I going to accomplish by the end of this week? Well, this is what God did. Okay? It starts out with what He was going to do before He does it. Okay? So in other words, I mean, life has got to have dreams, goals, and then endpoints. Without dreams and goals to start out, and without something that you're aiming to achieve, life becomes really meaningless. It's just a never-ending cycle of doing the same things over and over again, not really even knowing that you've gotten any better or your life has changed. It becomes meaningless. And that's really tying it back to socialism. Socialism really creates that kind of a mentality where it's a never-ending cycle of nothingness. Just no dreams, no aspirations, nothing to try to strive to achieve. In fact, well, I'll say this. Think about it. If you don't have a goal to start out, a vision for your week at the beginning of the week, think of how easy it is for distractions to come into your life. If you don't have a specific thing that you want to achieve, well, maybe I could watch TV for a few hours today because it doesn't really matter. Maybe I could just surf the internet looking at dumb topics for a long time that aren't really going to benefit me or anybody else in the long run. All kinds of things. Maybe I'll just check my email nonstop, looking at my phone. Did I get a new email? And you think about all those things that waste your time. But if you have a specific plan in your mind, what you want to accomplish, you start saying no to those things. You shove them aside. And that was one thing that, and you'd be surprised. I've been doing it for a couple weeks now, where I've had a little bit more of a disciplined plan in my mind, and I was able to say no to a lot of things that I didn't need to do, and it kept me on task. If I was getting emails, I'd be like, well, I got to set time to answer those emails. I'm not going to sit there and be a never-ending email responder and waste most of my time doing that. But you'd be amazed, and why I'm bringing this up is because if Jesus said that you had to be the one guy had 5 talents, the other guy had 2, and the other guy had 1, and they were given these talents according to their ability. What do you think one big factor of their productivity would include? It would be knowing how to manage your time, right? The guy with the 5 talents was probably a pretty good time manager, probably set goals a little bit better than the guy with the 2 talents, and so forth. So my point is if we want to be the profitable servant, we've got to figure out ways to not only be profitable in our daily work, but also profitable in our work for the kingdom of God as well. It's just a natural thing. This should be basic stuff that's taught to kids Jacob's age, but it's not. We just go through life aimlessly, having our lives directed by whatever what's on TV and whatever the new fads are, and we're just like slaves, being driven nonstop. And it takes discipline to break out of that cycle. Proverbs 4, verse 25 through 27 says, "Let thine eyes look right on, and thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet." This was the verse I was talking about. I forgot I had it. "And let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot." In other words, it says, when you come up with a destination you want to reach, you stay on that path that gets to that destination, and you don't go off this way or that way. You just keep going, okay? But without a destination, you're just going to go anywhere. It's like somebody without a plan for their day or for their week. They don't even know it. They just get up, start running around like a chicken with their head cut off, frantically trying to keep up with things. Anyways, all right, so I spent a lot of time on that. Oh, there's the verse. Sorry, I had it there too. Okay, verse 2. "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." So notice how this all starts out, without form and void. What project doesn't start out this way, without form and void? Everything we do starts out with kind of a mess. And it's our job to organize it, put it in order, and either create something or do something with it, right? And that's what God did. I mean, He's really showing us how to complete projects. There's some fascinating stuff by the end of the study that you'll see. And I want you to hang on because there's some really cool things we can glean from that. But when I built that shed out the back there, when I basically had to kind of come up with a plan in my mind. I said in the beginning I'm going to build a shed. Okay. I'm just trying to tie you back there. But in my mind, I thought, okay, I'm going to build a shed because I want to make this into a church. So I had to move my garage into the shed. So I ordered all the materials from Home Depot, I believe it was. I had to come up with a plan, order all the materials, and then Home Depot came with this big truck, delivered all my stuff in just basically one big pile, one big stack of lumber and shingles and you name it. And then basically I had to go through and start organizing and taking inventory of what I had before I could even start building. But it was the beginning of the process. You take something from chaos. Every project starts out with taking something that's messy, you start organizing it and building it, putting it together. But there's another thing that's really important here. The first thing that had to happen was the Spirit of God had moved upon the face of the waters. So he was taking action. Okay? First thing that happens, you hear all these success gurus always say, you just have to take action. Well, it's actually a biblical statement because God's Spirit was moving. Okay, he had a plan and he started moving towards that. Now check this out. Verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Okay, well, that makes sense. That's kind of a natural thing you would do. Just think about when you get up in the morning. One of the first things you do is you turn on a light, so you can see where you're going. And it's kind of fascinating. You see, this is the first thing God does as well. Many times my wife can attest to this. God was actually up before dark, okay, because he was up, he was moving, and then he turned the light on, right? Many people say, it's very important to be an early riser rather than a late riser, a late nighter. And I used to stay up really late till 2 a.m. studying the Bible because it was the quiet time, because the kids were all sleeping. So that was some really quiet time, good quiet time that I had. But there were other problems with that. It would be hard to get up and get going. And if the kids got up before me, then I was running around just trying to get things going, try to settle them down. But I discovered that if I try to get up early in the morning, try to get up before them, I started getting up early, now they get up early, which I want them to sleep in more. But if you get up early, your day goes a lot better. I mean, God got up early before he turned the light on. And so, anyways, there's something about it. There's just something about getting up early versus staying up late. I'm not going to get into all the science of it, but I've read and heard a lot of different reasons why. But I'll just leave it as that appears to be what God did. Now, there's many times I'll set my alarm at 5:30 a.m. and then I just don't want to get up, so I want to hit snooze. And so it'd be much better if I could try to do what God did here. You get up and that alarm goes off. If you know when you're going to get up, you just get up and turn on the light and get moving, right? So anyways, verse 4, and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. So here he is. He's kind of, in a way here, he's getting organized. He starts dividing things now. He divides the light from the darkness, and so on. So that's very interesting. All right. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So not only does he start dividing things, he actually starts naming things. If you're doing any kind of big project, it's always good to start separating things. If you're writing a paper for school or something, you start separating all your information and making categories and naming things before you actually start doing much of the building of the paper or the project that you're doing. So sorting things out, getting organized. Verse 6, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Okay, so more dividing and more separating. So you can see there's a process here that God's going through during his work day. Workweek. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. All right, and he called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Okay, I'm just going to mention something. There aren't any, notice he didn't say it was Monday or Tuesday or anything like that here. He said it was the second day. Now, a lot of people don't realize it, but our modern day calendar with Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I believe Thursday is supposed to be Thor's Day. We've assigned pagan names to our days of the week. And it's kind of, I wish we would just go back to the biblical way and call it day 1, day 2, and day 3. If you had to give it a name, you could call day 1 light day, day 2 heaven day. I made a list of them. I don't think I have it for you guys, but I made a list just for fun. You could come up with a biblical name for the days rather than naming it after these strange pagan gods. Anyways, but God just kept it as simple as day 1, day 2. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And he called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, I'm going to comment in a little bit about where it says, and God saw. He looked back at it. I'm going to comment on that in a little bit. But anyways, it says, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself, upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, that's pretty interesting, after his kind, and God saw that it was good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this, and God saw that, and it was good. What is he doing there? There's a word for this, what he's doing. He's actually reflecting, he's taking time to reflect upon his work. How many people do that today? That was one thing. I had a system where I'd get up in the morning, I made my plan, but I never evaluated my plans. Did it come out as I planned to do it? Or did I keep getting distracted by something else? So a plan still needs a way of reflecting upon it. You need to be able to kind of grade yourself, look back at it, okay? God, of course, saw his work and it was good. He did a good job and he was happy with it. But it's also important that at the end of each of our day, we look back at our day and we know what we accomplished. Because it gives us a sense of purpose, and then the next day, we're motivated, we're ready to get to the next day because we want to accomplish something else. And then it becomes a pattern where if you're actually looking back and grading yourself, you're actually striving to get better each and every day. But if you never reflect, if you never look at your life and say, what can I do better? You're never going to get better. You might might barely get a little bit better, but you're not going to get much better at whatever you're called to do. Now, for me, my goal, I want to be the guy with the 5 talents that gets another 5, and he's got 10. And then, I think everybody should want that. That would give you joy, satisfaction that your work was good. The lazy servant, he wouldn't have anything to reflect upon. The socialist, the guy that says, I'm not going to do it, I just want something handed to me. I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to do anything. There's nothing for him to reflect upon. Anyways, here's something I wanted to show you. I actually have it right here. I started using a planner. So instead of what I would do before is I'd make my daily plan on a piece of paper. I'd keep it on my desk. I'd write my plan out, and I thought that was pretty good. And then I would, by the end of the day, I'd just crumple up and throw it away because my day was over. But I thought about it. I thought, well, keeping it because I read these verses where God was reflecting upon his day. And I said, well, that's something I'm not doing. Well, how could I do that? I'm not going to keep a bunch of loose papers everywhere with my plan on it. So then I decided to get this planner. It's actually a really neat one designed to do basically this. What we're talking about. And this is just a model. Notice I have the date on there, 1-1-2030. This isn't my real day. So I didn't want to give you my secrets of my schedule. But it's a fake day. So anyways, there's things, here's the simple breakdown is it starts out right here. Maybe I can do it like this. There we go. Oh, wrong tool. All right, there we go. So there's the hours of the day. If you know Benjamin Franklin, a lot of people know about it. He had a calendar that he kept, and I think it was a journal. It was kind of a lot like this. We know that guy was a very productive guy. He might not have been the greatest Christian, but he was an inventor. He did all kinds of stuff. He got a lot done, and his day was really that simple. He just blocked out certain times of his day. Notice these are the daylight hours, 6 to 9. And like here I got breakfast, Bible study, you block it out, exercise, work, lunch, check emails, and so on and so forth. But then at the end of the day, prayer and reflection. And then in this particular planner, in the morning you put what you're grateful for. I put life, family, freedom, the best wife I could ever ask for. I didn't put that on there this time, but it's in my real one. A goal, finish studying the entire Bible in 3 years. Today's targets, read Genesis 1 and 2, complete work project, play board game with family, and whatever. And then you have your lessons learned. This is your reflection part. God saw, and it was good. We should model our life after that. Our work week should be similar to his. And then here, which is neat, you record your wins. Now the purpose of recording these wins, it motivates you. Because you win on if you played on any sports team, one win now kind of begets another win. You start gaining confidence. You got, momentum is huge in sports. Well, it's huge in life as well. But when you start seeing your wins, you're like, yeah, all right, yeah, I did that. And then you're always striving. But without any of this stuff here, any kind of organization, life is very disorganized. It's like God said in the beginning, Genesis 1, and the earth was without form and void. There's no order to it, no structure. And then he began to put structure to it. So, and then at the end of the day, you write what you're grateful for at the end of the day. This way you're not a negative Nancy, right? You're not always complaining, right? If you got to put what you're grateful for. But it's a biblical thing as well. This isn't really a Bible planner, but it's built off of biblical concepts from what I can tell. Because we are supposed to be thankful to God. We're supposed to offer him thanksgiving and praise. So if you're grateful for things, it was really cool. I've been using this only for a couple weeks now, but it's way better than the system I was using. And I just feel 10 times more motivated to get things done. Because I don't want to give up hockey. I want to be able to do hockey and do ministry. I had to figure out a way to do it. And I really believe that we waste a lot more time than we think we waste. What else was I going to say about this? Oh, there's a Psalm Chapter 1. I got on here, you see I just wrote a little diagram. I'm not an artist, but this is supposed to be a tree planted by rivers of water. Psalm Chapter 1. Now, our life as a Christian is supposed to be like that. You're supposed to have a constant intake of God's Word like a river coming into us. But then in turn, we're supposed to take that water and produce fruits with it for other people to enjoy. Okay? So that's kind of my mission as a pastor. I look at it this way. I study the Word of God, and I want to be able to share Bible studies, which would be the fruits. So I intake and I want to output. Our lives should always be like that. We should be thinking, I'm going to intake, but then give back. Intake and give back. And really, capitalism, since we talked about that, is designed really to do just that. You take in and you give back. You take in and you give back. Well, the socialists will say, oh, it's all selfishness. It's all greed. Well, parts of it are. They're right, and that's why they can convince people of their argument. But parts of it aren't as well. All right, so anyways, I just want to show an example there. This was basically, from what I can understand, this really does follow the model of what God laid out for us in Genesis Chapter 1 on how to take your life from chaos and disorder to having a purpose. One way to do this, one little trick I learned, I used to get up and I'd make my plan, and I'd have to decide when am I going to study for research for the sermon in the week. When am I going to start putting things together by the end of the week to be able to teach it on Sunday? Well, I'd always be at different times and stuff like that. I'd kind of squeeze it in when I want it, or when I felt would be a good time. But if you block out certain times of the week and you have that time dedicated to that, if you can, on a daily basis, and you do it every day, who can say one word that describes the benefit of that? What does that do? It creates a habit. And you'll be a lot more productive if you block out certain times where you just do it. You get up and you do it. So you don't have to sit there and think about, oh, do I want to do this day? No, you just you find your priorities. Now, my biggest priority of the work week would be being able to produce a Bible study at the end of the week. So I got to block out. The best thing for me to do is to block out certain times, and I try to make this as non-negotiable as I can. Nothing is going to get. I try to determine. Now, there's a little bit of flexibility here and there. I'm not saying take it to the extreme, but basically overall, nothing I have in my mind. Nothing is going to deter me from these blocks of my time, because that is my biggest priority in my life right now. And I want to make sure that gets done before anything else. So if I block it out, it just happens. I don't have to get up and think about it. I start running, just getting up running. And here's an example of the kids' school. We had a schedule, we had a system that worked, but this works much better when we block out certain times for each topic and so forth, and even plan meals. I try to plan the meals basically where they're the same thing every day. There might be a little fluctuation. I might add in every other week, maybe I'll have some kind of a cycle. But the point is, I don't have to get up every week now where I'd have to get up every week. Okay, what are we going to have for dinner this week? And then I'd spend all this time writing all this stuff down, thinking about it. Whereas now I just get up, I know what we're going to have, and I make sure we have the food. And then, so you start developing a system, in other words, and you start getting a pattern down. And anybody knows when they've done something, a job at work, it's tough at first, right? Even you got to figure it out, and then all of a sudden everybody says, okay, now I got a system down for it. Well, we don't do it with our schedules, which is bizarre. How many people do you know that actually do this? Not too many people. But when you get a system down, then when you come across those hard to do things, they're a lot easier to knock out. You just do it. And you look at, and now I don't want to make this into a success thing, but it is important because we're supposed to be the profitable servant. But if you look at any person who's successful in the world, they do these things. They set goals, they come up with a system to reach those goals, and they usually have a very disciplined daily routine. And that doesn't change very much because they know if it changes, now they're off the path from reaching that destination that they had set. Any kind of business owner, he's not just creating a big business because he's winging it every day. I mean, he knows what he's doing. Any big business creator and so forth. All right. So am I saying I'm the expert time planner? No, I'm just sharing with you my reflections of what I've learned after I figured out I got to figure out a way to be more productive. Genesis 1 verse 14. I'll try to speed this up a little bit and to get to the end here. We're almost there actually. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Well, this basically, all these lights in heaven basically give us our calendar. Okay, so God, he did that to help organize our life. Verse 15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and he made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, okay, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. Now this is really interesting because this was before man was even created. This was the first form of government that God created, and it still reigns over the earth today. No matter where you live, we follow this government. Can anybody, you get what I'm saying? When the sun comes, it doesn't matter if you live in China or if you live in America, that sun governs your life, because when it comes up and it comes down, it determines when you're going to get up and start working and when you're not, generally speaking. But it's the same for everybody. It is the most basic form of government. In fact, this isn't the scope of our topic, but you'll see these things written about in the book of Revelation as well. And when you understand God's Word, you dig in deep and try to understand the spiritual significance of things. A lot of times in the Bible, sun and moon and stars, we actually just read about it with Joseph's life, but they represent governments, earthly governments of some sort. But here, I'm not going into that today. I just want to throw that in there in passing. In other words, okay, so nobody escapes this form of government. The sun, well, just think about the growing seasons. Mankind can't determine, China can't determine, okay, now we're going to go, our growing season now is going to go from, I think I want it from December to February. You know, it's going to work according to how God's got it set. Okay? And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And, now check this out, at the end of his day, and God saw that it was good. It was a win, right? And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. Now this is interesting here. There's a lot of different things God did during his work week. It wasn't just creating and forming things. Sometimes he divided something. Sometimes his work involved naming something. Here, part of God's work was blessing something. Now you think about that in our life. How often do we try to bless other people that we come across? You know, it was important for God. Part of his work week involved a portion of his day blessing something. And you know, you think about, like I mentioned earlier, let's say you work for a bank, or you work for a hospital or a school or whatever. You're trying to bless others with your work. If you're not working, then you're not blessing other people. So when you look at work from that standpoint, it's a lot more meaningful, I would say, that when you work, you actually. That's really the basis of capitalism, right? Everybody works because they want a paycheck, but in turn, it actually does bless other people. All right, and the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, now notice it starts on the beginning, and God said, it's kind of his daily goal, what he's going to do. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Now, why does he keep saying, and God saw that it was good? You say, well, why does God need to say that? Well, obviously, it's obvious that God is saying that because it is a formula, I guess, for lack of a better word, a formula of how we are supposed to govern our lives. He's given us the template. He's showing us the way. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much today. This would be a whole nother study. But man's basic purpose, everything he does in his work, should be to have dominion over the earth. Now we think of things where people create inventions. That's all part of gaining mastery over the earth. Electricity, light, railroads, cars. That's all part of this dominion mandate from a material standpoint anyways. From a spiritual standpoint, it should be there as well. Spreading, Jesus said, go forth into all the world, making disciples of all nations. That is having dominion. Verse 27, and God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the face of the earth. Now think about this. How are they supposed to have dominion over the earth? How are they supposed to subdue the earth? Obviously it takes work, some kind of effort. It takes thinking, strategizing, you name it. One part of being fruitful and multiplying, a lot of people don't find too hard to do. That would be having children, but past that, there's a lot of other things to do. But it's actually interesting. That was part of the dominion mandate, was to be fruitful, to have children, and reproduce yourself, along with taking mastery of the world. Now, again, this could be through farming, inventing, creating, managing things, you name it. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. So in other words, it started out in the beginning that God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, it started out with the big picture. Now he gets to the end. Starts out basically with the goal in mind, the big picture, and now he completed his task, mission accomplished. And now we don't get to hear about God's next week. It's not there. That's another one of those topics for another time. There is kind of an answer to that I've discovered. But anyways, all we're given is that first week, but it doesn't end yet. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all the work which he created and made. Now again, could you imagine if there was no such thing as a Sabbath? There would be no definite start and end point. It would just be a continuous cycle of the same stuff, just over and over again. Now, when you look at God's calendar, it's all about that. Whether you're looking at the daily calendar, the weekly, the yearly, the monthly, the yearly, God has all these different cycles and seasons. And so there's a start and there's a finish. There's a start and a finish. Smaller starts and finish, bigger starts, bigger chunks. It's fascinating. It actually keeps life interesting. So you could say, well, that blocking out your schedule like that looks pretty boring. That would get pretty boring. No, because you do a lot of the same things, but then new things are added on. It's still always changing, in a sense. But anyways, not going to go into all that much. I'm going to jump back real quick, and then I'm going to show you something, a little analysis of what God's work, what he did during his work week. And it's an interesting pattern. But anyways, Exodus 20 verse 9, 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle even, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. So everybody is supposed to get this day off. Man, if we still had a day like this that our country would actually dedicate, I wouldn't have to worry about whether or not I have a hockey tournament game on a Sunday morning. If everybody had the same day off, we'd be able to manage our schedules way better. But we've gotten away from that. Now it's a tricky balancing act because you don't want to sacrifice some things, but then when you don't do that, it gets very complicated. It'd be a lot easier if we blocked out, if everybody blocked it out, even your animals, your stranger, everybody, this is the day that we rest. Everything's shut down, spend time with your family, enjoy your rest. But now it's just a never-ending cycle that we're creating. Verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. Okay, a special day. I mean, this was the first week of the first chapter of the Bible. But I'll say one thing. What had to come before rest? Work. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. The socialists would say rest comes before. But it really is, they don't want to work, so it's all about rest. But to truly enjoy your rest, you've got to first work. I've noticed that when you are disciplined and you stay on task and you have a day off, then it feels really good. You don't feel like, oh man, I'm so far behind. You feel good. But basically, this is what God's project was, creating the heavens and the earth. Now this was just in my notes, so it's a little bit sloppy. But I decided to just share this with you guys. But I went down each day here and I tried to figure out what he was doing or how he did this. So the first day, all he did was separate day and night. I mean, it doesn't really seem like a lot. And then the second day, he separated heaven and earth. So he's just organizing things. And then on the third day, he separated the land and the sea. So he concentrated his efforts on the earth that day. And then he goes from working on the earth to day 4. Then he goes up and works in the heavens and starts organizing the light into the sun and the moon and the stars. Because before that, the light was just one light. There was no organization to it. Then he comes back to earth and starts working on that. So he fills the sea with life. And then he comes back and fills the earth with life on day 6. And then on the 7th, he just enjoys everything that he made. But you can see here, it's a step-by-step process. He didn't just do everything in one day. It doesn't say in the beginning, God created everything and filled the earth and everything was done. He spread it out over 6 days. Does he have to do that?
No.
No, but he chose. What we get to Exodus, and I read that verse. It says, in 6 days, God made heaven and earth, so you should do your work in those days. He did it as an example for us on how we are to go. This is the most basic structure of our life. Should be 6 + 1 = 7. That's the most basic command we are given. The most, and then he gave us daily clues. He reflected upon what he did. And so on. Well, it started out with him just getting moving, turning on the light, and then one little bit at a time. Now, anybody knows if they tried to do a big project all in one day, it usually turned out pretty crappy. But if you do it over a period of time and break it down into chunks, it's a lot easier and more doable. But not only, I want to say one more thing about this, and then we're just about to close up. There was something else really neat about this. Now, if Damien's a business owner here. God actually not only this wasn't just some project that ended. God designed something here very unique in that it was a system that he built. I'll put it this way. God built a system that ran itself. The trees have seeds, they grow other trees, and he basically he designed it, built it, and it can just basically run all on its own. Now, if you read a lot about business owners, that's what they're constantly trying to do. They're trying to create a system that basically runs itself. So not only do you have a cool project that God made, but an amazing self-sustaining system that nobody can even come close to replicating. But it's there for people that want to develop fruit-producing, productive systems to follow his example. 6 plus 1. Just start with that. If this seems complicated, if you first start out setting aside a day of rest, you're going to see your productivity increase. You're going to be happier. You're not going to be as stressed. And you're going to get more done anyways than you would have if you worked 7 days all the time. It's a hard concept for us. But it is true. Now, I'm just going to recap again here. Part of God's work, He spoke, He divided, He named, He created, He blessed, He saw. A lot of different forms of work. We saw Him do all these different things during that time. But let me just go back and recap real quick. So I guess basically in order to apply this lesson practically, Genesis chapter 1, we come up with a vision. You make a plan for each week. That's the most basic thing. You do quarterly and all that kind of stuff too. But I'm just sticking with Genesis 1. And then you dive in and you just get started, doing one piece at a time. And before you know it, you're done doing it by the end of the week. And you don't realize how all those little steps build up. Now, you could have a lot of wasted time, little steps that lead to something else that amounts to nothing. Or you could have a bunch of little steps that actually have purpose and a direction to them, and they lead to actually accomplishing something, getting something done. Now, Genesis chapter 1 is just the basic template of God's work week. You could find so much more advice all throughout the Bible, in the book of Proverbs. Jesus' teachings about the kingdom of heaven is like the man that has the talents and he spreads them and so on. There's so much more. But this was just my effort of trying to get to the beginning, saying, hey, I want to organize this chaos a little bit better, more efficiently than I have. How do I do it? And I learned a lot of different things just by reading God's word and just looking at it and saying, what was he doing? That was this. I mean, nobody's ever created anything like he's created. I'm not saying we're going to be able to do that. But if you want to look at somebody who's done something very successful, you look at God and model yourself after him, because we are all, after all, created in his image. So we're supposed to strive to be like him and take his example. Anybody got any questions or comments? I know we got done before 12, but...
No, one of the things that you kind of brought up at the end that I was thinking the whole time, how cool it is that God could have just snapped his fingers and bam, everything's there. But instead he did it in a way that is personal to us. He's not just this big power in the sky. He's actually, gives us intricate details and practical things we can use in our life right from the very beginning. And in a way, if you really stop and think about it, that's fascinating that he would do it that way. There's a reason for it.
Right. Yeah, you can look at Genesis 1 practically like we did today. You can apply it spiritually. You can look at it scientifically.
He could have done 8 days and a day of rest. He could have done 2 days and 3 days of rest. He could have, but for some reason, and it's that way throughout the Bible, that's why I love studying it, is that he's the guy that created us, so who would know better of how to do things in life? And just one example. Well,
now the Soviet Union, I believe, there have been attempts to get away from the 7-day week. The Soviet Union, I believe, and I think it was in the 40s, if I remember right, 20s or 40s. They did go to like a 4-day week for a while of some sort. And then I think the French, went to a 10-day week. And they just couldn't do it. I mean, people would become broken down, sick, whatever, you name it. We just can't. I mean, it's amazing that even the pagan governments are really forced to go back to some version of a 7-day week.
Right.
Because it's built in us. I read some research before. They said that your heart actually slows down every 7th day. So you look at all these people with all these different health problems these days. They say a lot of it is simply they're not taking the Sabbath day. They're not taking a rest. So the body then either forces you to take a rest by shutting down and getting sick, or eventually you end up with all kinds of different health ailments. and things like that. Because we're not designed to go nonstop all the time. Anything else?
No, but no. I'm motivated. Get more organized in my life.
My list made.
I've kind of been dropping the ball a little bit.
Little question about the pagan days. So do you consider the Sabbath on Saturday? Because of that Sunday being named after Ra.
Yeah, that's a big, huge argument. I take the simple approach of it's six and 1, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So we could, there's denominations that fight over, is it Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah.
I think it was probably Saturday, and then Sunday came along, and that was, Christians kind of turned that into the Sabbath because it was a new beginning. Mm-hmm. It was day 8, but still yet,
It's a day of rest.
yeah, a day of rest, right, or whatever. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. We could get into that one sometime. But for me, my Sabbath day is on Mondays because that's the only day that I can actually take off. And I have the kids; that's their independent school day, and I've kind of got them disciplined into a system where they can work independently, and they have an accountability system to be able to make sure they're actually doing their stuff. But that's the day that I can just sit and enjoy and just read for myself.
Routine that the kids know what to expect.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I don't plan anything on the Sabbath. If I feel like doing something, I'll just go do it. But I usually sleep in a little bit and then read and whatever, something that I find relaxing. But what I used to do is I used to try to do it, and I still struggle with it. I still get tempted to answer emails and things like that. I'm like, oh, it has to get done today. It has to get done today. And then before you know it, you answer one email. And now you're 2 hours into solving some kind of problem that needs to be fixed. And I think the biggest key is you just have to learn to say no and to say, I'm not changing on that. Now, for me, I think next year for coaching hockey and things like that, whatever hockey teams I coach, I will probably just be up front right away and say I'm not coaching on Mondays. If I'm head coach of a team or something, I'll have the assistants run it. And I'll just be straight up from the beginning. Nothing's taking that Sabbath from me. Because then it's just going to be a never-ending cycle of now I'm sucked into working nonstop all the time again. So that's the hardest part. And because people don't, like I said before, it would have been a lot easier if we just all agreed on one day of the week. Then you could. Seems
like it used to be that way more, and
yeah.
Like with sports, even I've noticed it's gotten more and more where we're just doing sports on Sundays now.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Way of the world.
Yeah, I know, and most pastors I've heard talk about, they usually take Monday off because Sunday's kind of a work day. You got to get up and deliver the message and all that. So. But yeah, so whatever. For me and our family, we just try to pick whatever day works the best for us that we can maintain everything else. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. It's strange that it would be a hard thing to do, to find a day that you could just not do anything mandatory.
Christian Overcomers is brought to you by the tithes and offerings of our listeners. If you would like to support our ministry, please go to ChristianOvercomers.com. God bless you, and thank you for your support.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible sword. His truth is marching on.